I'm Demi.
And I'm also Demi.
And I'm Mr. Sharp from Turner Schools Radio.
We'll be interviewing 5 people who are standing for the election to be the MP for Folkestone and Hythe. Today we are joined by Damian Collins, who has been the Conservative Party MP for Folkestone and Hythe since 2010. Welcome to Turner Schools Radio.
Briefly, tell us about yourself.
Well, thank you for having me on the show. It's nice to be with you. As you said in your introduction, I've been the Member of Parliament for 14 years in Folkestone and Hythe. So this is my 5th election where I'm standing for re-election. In that time, as well as being an MP, I've chaired committees in the House of Commons and been a government minister and been involved in numerous different sort of projects and initiatives across the constituency. And I got into politics, I think when I was probably a student, I started to take an interest in politics for the first time, but I didn't come from a particularly political family. No, my parents hadn't been involved in politics. They were sort of Conservative voters, but actually my grandparents were probably Labour voters. My father's family moved to England from Ireland in the 1950s when he was a small boy when they moved over. So I didn't come from a kind of particularly political or particularly conservative background. And what attracted me to politics was I could see that, like a lot of young people, you get passionate ideas about the issues you see in your community or in the world, and you want to have a voice, you want to make a difference. And what I really always thought was that Parliament is where you get the chance to make that difference. It's where our laws are made, it's where our taxes are set, that's where the big decisions are made. And therefore, if you wanted to try and use your voice to achieve things, then Parliament was the place you went to do it. And I suppose that I was attracted to the Conservative Party because what I've always believed is that we should give people opportunity and then back those people to make the most of those opportunities. Not everyone will achieve the same things, and we should look after people that need support, but we should, on the whole, get behind businesses, organisations, individuals to help them achieve what they want to give them the skills that they need to achieve, and then give them the space and the freedom to do it. And I always thought that's what was at the heart of what the Conservative Party was about, and that's what attracted me to it.
So what are the Conservative Party's priorities?
I'd say the Conservative Party's priorities reflect the duties of any government, really. The first duty is to keep people safe. So we need a strong defence to keep us safe from countries and people that wish to do us harm, and a strong sort of police to help fight crime and keep people safe in their communities. We need to have a strong economy because the economy generates the wealth of the nation. A strong economy helps pay for schools and hospitals, provides people with work. And we need to support people as well. So I think there's always this tension in politics. It runs across everything, which is there are constant demands for the government to spend more money on things, services that people use. People say, why can't you spend more money on this? But we've got to remember the government doesn't really have any money. The money the government has it raises through taxes, which people pay. So we always have to try and get the balance right between making sure we can fund the services that we all rely on, but also making sure we don't tax people too much. We give people the freedom to spend the money they've earned in the ways they think best. And often what's good for the economy is when people have money in their pockets and the freedom to spend that money, that helps generate jobs for other people and work for other people. It doesn't just help those people buy the things they want to buy.
Tell us about what you have done for the local area since 2010.
Well, 2010 is a long time ago. So, and there's a lot has changed in that time, and a lot of that is due to sort of government investment and activity. We have seen in the constituency brand new schools being built, replacing old schools. So schools like the Marsh Academy in New Romney, in Folkestone for children with special educational needs, we now have the fantastic new build school, the Beacon, which replaced 2 older schools which weren't really fit for purpose in terms of their facilities. Other schools in the district, like the Hythe, have had brand new buildings which the government have helped to pay for. And we have the Turner Free School in Cheriton. Again, it's a completely newly built school replacing the old Pent Valley School. And so it's great to see that kind of investment in the community. You see all along the coast the new coastal defence schemes to protect, in particular, Romney Marsh from the sea. So those schemes really run from Hythe all the way down to Lydd Ranges. So tens of millions of pounds have been invested in those big projects. So that's really important. But also, not just the big infrastructure projects, but helping our local economy grow. We've seen a lot of investment in Folkestone in particular in the last few years. Businesses and individuals in investing, setting up new companies. We've got over 600 new companies that have been now more than we had in 2010. We've created, I think, 11,000 apprenticeships. The apprenticeship rates in Central Folkestone have doubled, I think, compared to what they were 10 years or so ago. So people are making the most of the opportunities that are here. And I think the future for this area is very bright. And the fact that Folkestone was recognised as recently by the Sunday Times as the best place in the southeast of England to live, whilst we may have felt that in 2010, it's probably unlikely that would have been recognised by a group like that. And when I was first elected to Parliament, the Harbour Arm didn't exist as an attraction. It was the kind of derelict and disused. People were saying, well, when will the seafront regeneration ever happen? When will the regeneration of the old town ever start? And we now enjoy those facilities, and we see other investment coming in. So I think it's been a positive period over the last 14 years, and I hope we can build on that.
When preparing for these series of interviews, I went round the Folkestone Academy staff and talked to them about them, asked them if they had any questions. And a recurring point that came up was the lack of people's trust nowadays in politicians. So we've had awful instances where Downing Street were partying when people were dying of COVID. Recently, politicians, mainly Conservative Party members, are under investigation for betting on the general election. What can you say to convince our children, parents of staff that we can trust your party to manage professionally?
I think there are always cases where people do the wrong things and make mistakes. People that have, put bets on for the election, whoever they are, I don't think should do that. I think these rules aren't expressed, but I think we should have clearer rules that really say, rather like sports people aren't allowed to bet on the sports that they take part in, politicians shouldn't be betting on election results. So that was, people made a mistake and they were wrong in doing that, and that should be put right. But I don't see that the fact that took place as a kind of systemic failure of an organisation. I think in any organisation you'll get people that will make mistakes. I think with the Downing Street parties during COVID, people felt very upset about that because of the restrictions they'd had to live through. But also Downing Street was a very different place. It was where everyone else was working at home. That was a building which was full of people working together every day. And in that environment, people made mistakes. And that wasn't called out by the police at the time or the civil servants. It wasn't just politicians making mistakes. It was everyone in that building was part of that failure. And clearly lessons have been learned for that. And some people have paid a heavy price for it. But I think what you have to say is on the things that there will always be people that make mistakes and get things wrong. But on the things that really matter, I think like the big decisions we take, like during the pandemic, the big decisions we took to protect people's incomes through the furlough scheme, to keep people safe, to run a health service where we never ran out of ventilators or we never ran out of PPE, those where we had a vaccine delivered first in the world, and Folkestone had the first mass vaccination centre in Kent. Those are probably the really important decisions. And so I think, like any organisation, you've got to balance off the behaviour of some people, which is wrong, versus a body of people who were working hard day and night to do the right thing and be held to account for what they do. And I don't think there's ever been a golden era where everyone thought everyone in politics was wonderful. You've got to agree with people, and often you disagree with people in politics. But I think all you can do is try and do the right thing. And be one of the most common questions you get asked as a member of parliament, or statements get put to you, is people say to you, you're my member of parliament, you should represent my views. And I said, well, in this constituency, there are 69,000 voters, and they don't all agree with each other. So whose views do I represent? So you have to use your judgment to do the right thing, to say what you're going to do and do it, and accept the fact there'll be some people that won't agree with you and will criticise for it. But your only guiding star can really be if you think you're doing the right thing. And if you don't think you're doing the right thing, you shouldn't be doing it, and you'd be judged on trying to do the right thing.
Do you or your party think smartphones or social media should be banned for under 18s to improve mental health?
I think this is a really important question. I've done a huge amount of work on this in Parliament as chair of the Digital Culture, Media and Sports Select Committee and as a minister on the piece of work that became the Online Safety Act. So what we've done there is to regulate social media spaces and say that there are standards the companies must meet. I don't think it's realistic to say teenagers shouldn't have smartphones, or that teenagers shouldn't be on social media. I think what is realistic to say is the companies that have designed those systems to make money out of them should act responsibly. I know there'll be lots of people listening to this radio programme who, when they go on TikTok or Snapchat or Instagram, will see content they find upsetting and disturbing. It's not necessarily from accounts that they follow, it's not necessarily things they want to see, but for some reason the system is selecting it and showing it to them, even if that's content that promotes self-harm and suicide. So what we've done now is we've made that an offence. So, these big companies like Instagram and Facebook and TikTok will face criminal charges if they fail to meet their duties. And I think these companies have designed these systems to make money out of them, by engaging users with content, and where that is harmful in giving children access to content that could cause them harm or content that should be restricted for adults only, then we should hold those companies to account. And that's what we've done by changing the law. There's nothing inherently dangerous about a smartphone. And I've got teenage children, as a parent, you need to be in touch with them. There are tools and systems that they have on there which they need to keep them safe and access their schoolwork and other things. But I don't think we should just give the tech companies a free pass and say, well, social media can never be safe, therefore it must be banned. I think we say, no, you can make it safe, and we're now making you legally responsible to keep it safe.
Mr. Murphy, the head of Turner Schools, wants to know, how do you improve the education system for children living in poverty?
I think improving educational standards for everyone is our kind of start point. And actually, one of the achievements, I think, of the last 14 years in government that I think we should talk more about is the improvement in reading and math standards in English schools, which are substantially better than they were in 2010 for younger children, and are now some of the best in the world. And that means that all children are getting a better start to their education and will do better through education. And for everyone, the way we support people having a nice life, enough money, the things they want, is through giving them the skills and the training, the education they need to find a job that will give them those rewards. No amount of government support can replace what someone can achieve if they've been given the skills and the opportunity to make that success. So therefore, having high standards for everyone, seeing better standards and rising standards in the quality of schools and the quality of education for all children, that's the best place to start. But of course, children from poorer backgrounds often need more support. That's why we have free school meals. That's why we have teaching assistants to help children that need extra help in the class. But what we've got to focus on is raising all standards, because then more children will get the qualifications they need to go on to further study and get the jobs that they need.
It was reported fairly recently that the UK had actually gone up in the international league tables, I think for English and maths, or English, maths and science. But what had actually happened is the performance of children in England had actually fallen since 2018. It's just the other countries had fallen more. We are in a post-pandemic world. Now, Rishi Sunak has pledged to keep school funding the same. That's in your manifesto. But in reality, due to the fall in pupil numbers, this means school budgets will actually be cut. This morning I was reading the IFS document that a reduction on this scale apparently has not been seen since the 1970s. But education is a pathway out of poverty for millions of families. Why won't you invest enough, or plan to invest enough, in schools to help these children get out of poverty?
Well, as you said, the school's budget will remain protected. And that will be again as it has in the past, and that will be during a time when there'll be pressure for savings in other government departments. So, it is an important commitment, and I think shows the value that we rightly attach to it. Schools have always had funding formulas based on the number of pupils they're educating, and that we do go through periods of population spikes. I remember when we built the Martello Grove Primary School in Folkestone, that was in response to a sudden spike in the number of children in the town and the need for additional places, to the extent that it required building a new school. But you go through periods where those numbers drop as well. So that is something all schools have to manage and contend with. One of the reasons we passed the Academies Act, was to make so that all schools could become academies and manage their budgets across multiple years, which makes it easier to allow for those changes as well, where in the old days, if you didn't spend your money every year, it was clawed back and you couldn't invest it in future years. But the overall commitment to funding education and funding schools and keeping that as a protected budget absolutely remains, because as you rightly say, education is a good education, I think, is a right for our children. And the skills and the knowledge people will acquire through good education will be the bedrock of their future lives.
Do you not think that perhaps higher taxation to help the education system, specifically for children in areas such as these, is actually worth it for your own constituency?
Well, I think taxation is already high. The overall burden of taxation for the nation is high because, as a government, we've had to do two things. We had to pay for the financial crisis we inherited from the Labour Party in 2010. We had to pay for the pandemic, which was the right investment we had to make. And I think the decision we want to make now is that as the economy is back where it should be, it's growing, inflation's back at 2%, we expect interest rates to be falling this summer. That relieves a lot of the pressure and the fear of that big bill coming because of the energy crisis and the energy spike in energy costs because of the war in Ukraine. We've eased through that period. We supported people through that period. So we've now reached a point where I think there's a decision that can be made. Is do we say, particularly to working people, that we want to try and ease that burden of taxation on you. We want to allow you to keep more of the money that you earn rather than just loading on yet more spending and yet more debt and higher taxes onto the country. And then looking at this area, what I want to continue to do as the Member of Parliament, what's important is we continue to attract jobs and investment to this area, that is what is driving the regeneration of this town and is creating more opportunities for young people than existed 15 years ago.
How will you sort the cost of living crisis, in particular rent and energy bills?
That's a really important question. I mean, energy bills has been created a huge amount of pressure because we saw a very big spike in energy costs because of the war in Ukraine and the impact that had on the energy markets in Europe. We gave a substantial support, and hundreds of pounds people would have received to help take the pressure off those rising energy bills. And energy bills are now coming down. So I think that fear that people had, I think, is now being eased. It's that those bills are being more manageable. Inflation being back at 2% helps people also with rising bills because we're now in a position where people's wages are rising faster than the bills they have to pay. In terms of rents, I mean, I think what we need is more of a supply of affordable housing. And in Folkestone, there are two schemes in particular, which I've been working with the council to help bring forward. We've had government money to help back them as well. At Biggins Wood and at Ship Street in Folkestone, these are derelict industrial sites, which will be redeveloped for housing, including affordable housing for people in the town.
Miss Cantor from Folkestone Academy asked how you stop our rivers and the sea being polluted by sewage.
Yeah, so to start off, what we do now is we share information when sewage discharge happens, because I think people have a right to know. But before 2010, there was very little information shared. So it's right that people get that information. And therefore, because of that transparency, because we now know when it's happening, we hold the water companies to account for what they're doing. We expect higher standards of them. The directors of those companies will face criminal penalties now if they fail to meet the obligations they're set. But the water companies don't just do what they want. They have to come up with a plan every 5 years of what they're going to invest. But I don't think the performance of the water companies is good enough. It has to improve, and we think through very close and strict monitoring, very high legal standards, and very high sanctions and penalties, including criminal penalties if the companies get it wrong. I think that's the right way to go.
In your position as the MP, can you tell us what you've done specifically, because we live in a coastal area, in liaison with the water companies to try and tackle this?
Yeah, well, I mean, one very specific issue I would give is that there's a general question about sewage discharge at sea and into rivers. There's also a very localised problem here as well. So a lot of people that live on the marsh will be familiar with the water quality issues at St Mary's Bay and Littlestone, which are now poor. That is not connected to the bigger issue of sewage discharge at sea. That's a localised issue because of contamination of some of the, they're called sewers, but actually they're water courses on the marsh, particularly the new sewer, and there is contaminants getting into that. And so I've been working with the Environment Agency and Southern Water to identify the cause of that leak, which is sending pollutants into the sea there. Once we find it, we can fix it, and the companies are working very closely on that. I organised a public meeting in New Romney a couple of months ago to bring the Environment Agency and Southern Water together to answer my questions and questions from the public to report back on that. And also, out of that, Southern Water have also committed to being sharing more information with the local community about their investment plans and what they're looking to invest to. The big infrastructure, I've been down to the bottom of the sewer in Folkestone, which is just at the top of Tram Road by Southern Way at the Southern Water building there, and it goes deep underground. And that's about 25 years old. It's not like a creaking Victorian system. But on Romney Marsh, there are a lot of old sewers and which need fixing and repairing. But in 2010, no one was responsible for them. They were all unadopted. They've been put in by builders randomly over the years. We've now made Southern Water legally responsible for them all. So that means it's their job to turn out when there's a problem and to fix them. They're doing a job that no one was doing 15 years ago.
I think we have to talk about illegal immigration at some stage, considering our location here on the coast. It's a major concern to many people. You haven't stopped the boats. What are you going to do about it if the Conservative Party are re-elected?
Well, we have to stop the boats. I mean, that is, I think, we have to do it for two reasons. In terms of our border security, it cannot be right that we should just have to accept tens of thousands of people turning up undocumented on the coast. In terms of also the danger of it, these crossings are risky. People have died. The work we've done with the French has helped to an extent, and the improved security at the Channel Tunnel and Calais port is one of the reasons why the boat crossing started, because it's too difficult to break in there in the way people used to do. What works with stopping the boats is when we create a strong disincentive for people to make the journeys. So a year or two ago, we had a lot of people from Albania that were making those crossings. We now have an agreement with the Albanian government, which means that anyone who enters the country in a dinghy on the coast gets sent straight back to Albania. I think it's over 90% decline in the number of Albanians making those crossings now. we can try and get returns agreements with other countries, but there'll be some countries in the world, like say Iran or Syria or Iraq, where we can't really have a returns agreement. And that's why the Rwanda policy is so important, to say, okay, if you come here in a dinghy, you cross over, you claim asylum when you arrive, your case will be processed in Rwanda, and if you're granted asylum, it will be there, in a safe country. That will, I think, create a disincentive for people to make those dinghy crossings if they think crossing the channel in a dinghy is a shortcut into the asylum system in the UK and to residency in the UK. What we can clearly say is no, that's not going to be the case. We have to create a disincentive for people to come, and that's worked with people from Albania. I think the Rwanda scheme will work with people from other countries that we can't send them back. Now, we've had to fight to get this legislation passed against the Labour Party, who voted against it every step of the way, against the people who challenged us in the courts. I've been voting on this in Parliament in the last few months before the election was called, and in July the first flights to Rwanda will start, and that is our best way of stopping the boats. Labour want to scrap that scheme, which I think will take us back to square one, and will send a green light for more people to make these dangerous crossings over the course of the summer. So I think it's important that we get this scheme underway, and in July the first flights will go.
Damian Collins, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.